What's up, guys? Derek here, back for another VOD review. Today, we are VOD reviewing a player that is not super known. I would say this isn't a household name. This is Triple Eight. Triple Eight, it'd be funny if they went 8th overall, but they actually went 7th overall in the Tacticians Cup. This is a game from day 3. And the reason I went to VOD review this game is because Triple Eight took an augment this game that I think is super I want to say underrated because it went so well for Triple Eight this game, but I think appropriately rated is a better way to say it because this is an augment that when you take it at the spot that Triple Eight took it averages a 5.0. This is fine vintage at 3-2. This isn't even 2-1 fine vintage, which I think has slightly better stats. This fine vintage taken stage 3. So, you know, I'll spoil that for you guys, and then we'll just watch the game and see how we end up getting there, because this first part of the game is just going to be how we actually get to fine vintage, and then after that, it's going to be how do we play around fine vintage. But yeah, I mean, fine vintage, I think, you know, if a lot of you guys remember earlier on in this set was a super highly rated augment. Also, interesting pickup even from the start is this item grab bag here. I kind of like it. I like item grab bag here when we can just kind of like play whatever around it. You know, you don't have to slam anything immediately. We also get this exalted in, which is a really cool use of exalted. And even watch this slam. This slam, I don't know when exactly Triple Eight slams this, but this is also, I think, a really cool setup here. He thinks about quicksilvering the Cho'Gath here, but he goes the Quicksilver BT Yasuo. Yasuo, you know, a slightly tanky, but slightly like he's kind of like a tanky damage dealer. You know, he does a little bit of damage, but he's more of a tank. He really likes these frontline items, and you know, Triple Eight already in this spot saying, okay, I mean, I got a QSS, I can make a BT, I want to play towards a game where I can play into Heavenly, which makes a lot of sense. But yeah, if you guys remember, Fine Vintage is an augment that, you know, early on in the set was completely broken. You know, it was really strong. They hard nerfed it to the first nerf was that it doesn't count around on the minion rounds. And if you guys don't know Fine Vintage, maybe I should explain that. It's an augment where if you leave your items on bench for 4 rounds, they turn into support item anvils, and you can build whatever support item you want. Well, not whatever one you want, but one of 4 choices. And so originally it was 3 rounds, and it counted neutral rounds. Also, wow, fantastic. I like the early level here. It's actually kind of easy to go for it 2-3 when you get exalted in 2-1, because as you can see, we're not wasting any XP here. So that's a nice little way you can play around exalted early. And hey, we get duelists in here. We get to play a Volibear. I would have liked to see a little bit more scouting, but, you know, maybe he was confident that there would be enough strong people in the lobby that this would make sense. But yeah, originally it was 3 rounds, and it counted neutral rounds. First, they made it not count neutral, so it had to be 5, or it had to be 3 player combats. Then they said it was still too broken, so they brought it down to 4 rounds, non-neutral rounds, I believe, still included. So it's a pretty bad augment. Like I talked about in the opener here, at 2-1, it averages probably like a 4.6, 4.7 here. I'll bring up the stats just to make sure I'm giving you guys the right numbers, and I'm doing here. Let's even do like Masters Plus, because it'll probably go up a little bit. Yeah, 4.53 at 2-1. So not actually that bad at 2-1, but at 3-2, 4.86, almost a 5 is what Fine Vintage averages when taken at 3-2. So yeah, like 2-1, you can sack your early game a bit, get some support items, start to get rolling. And then once you get later in the game, it's so many rounds, right? If you take it at 3-2, you have to sack 4 rounds from there. 3-2, 3-3, 3-5, 3-6. Like, you know, it becomes, you basically have to sack the entire rest of the stage, and then you'll get your items at 3-7. That's a lot of time to sack. The one thing I will say, though, is this has been a beautiful early game from Triple Eight here. He played around this Yasuo fantastically, played this Exalted plus Behemoth board, and look how much work this Yasuo does. I was watching this VOD with, or we were watching the game live with the Mossy Raptor, and he was like, there's no way that Yasuo wins this fight. And the Yasuo just easily smurfs it up. It's actually like not even close, because the Yasuo just with his BT, with a QSS, just does insane work here. And you can see throughout the game, Triple Eight saying like, okay, should I swap around what I want to include on this board? Should I, you know, get into Fated here? He's absolutely considering that if he can fit it. I don't actually recall what the units were that were exalted here, so the only thing is it might mess with exalted. So here we do have the opportunity to make 40. We're not going to opt to make 40 because now we can level, we can get in just another Behemoth for now, and the idea is maybe down the line we can get in Fated here. Augment slams here, we just go for a Morello, just because it's the item that makes the most sense, right? In our mind right now, we're still playing towards Heavenly here, and this is a fantastic Heavenly spot, right? We have a good streak, we have okay items made, we have half of an Edge of Night here, and, you know, BT Edge of Night QSS could be our items, and then we have half of a Last Whisper as well. We throw a Last Whisper in there, move one of those items over to Lee Sin, we have the Morello for the Morgana, like, our spot looks great for Heavenly here, but 3-2 Augment here, we get some options, and we roll first and hit Fine Vintage here. And this is not a situation, I think, where we were forced to take Fine Vintage, because we get Silver Veil. I know we have the QSS, but it's still not bad. And we get Pandora's items as well, which, like, even if you say, okay, Silver Veil sucks, we could just take, like, Pandora's items here and just play for, like, perfect items in Heavenly. But we take Fine Vintage here, which means Triple Eight has a read that this Augment is actually more playable than the stats say. We're going to pivot now out of Exalted into Faded here, just because this Faded bonus onto Yasuo is really, really nice. And, you know, just being level 6, it's actually relatively easy to fit. You know, we get to play these behemoths, which is really good. And you look at this Yasuo go, we're still on streak here. So I think one of the things immediately that I thought was interesting about this game is, you know, we take Fine Vintage, but we're playing it from a really strong win streak position. So these first couple of rounds that we lose, obviously we're holding 2 items on bench. We could push our win streak further, but we know that we're going to be comfortable sacking a couple of rounds. So I think if you're trying to figure out, you know, what are the conditions that exist when you should actually take this Augment, this actually seems pretty reasonable when you're in a spot where you're ahead, right? Because if you're really low here, if you're 60 HP and you've lost streaked already, it's going to be really tough for you to take Fine Vintage, lose another 4 fights, because at 4-1, you're just going to be dead. But in this spot, you know, we've taken our first loss here, but we only have 2 more rounds before we start getting support items. It actually feels like really, really good. The other thing that's interesting is that, you know, he doesn't opt to, also we get to pick up a Morgana here, which is fantastic holder of, well, the Morello, but we're probably getting rid of the Morello, right? It's kind of interesting. We're still looking to aim towards playing around Heavenly units, but we're basically going to play a similar board, but, you know, using Fine Vintage. But yeah, we didn't actually immediately like sell that Yasuo and throw these items on bench. We actually held those items on Yasuo for a little while, and here's the big question: is are we gonna put? We're not. Okay, I was really curious about this. We're gonna start rolling these items as well, the BT, the QSS, in this position here. I thought it was really, really interesting because, you know, he kept the BT, the QSS for a little while when we were holding on to the Yasuo, but then he said, you know what, we need to kind of get out of it here. I'm just going to, you know, throw these items on bench. I love belts here. This is Morello, and then we can just turn a Warmogs into another Fine Vintage item. I assume you actually want to make a real Morello here and put it on a unit, but we'll see. Looks like he is rolling it. This is a fantastic encounter for us, by the way. When you're playing Fine Vintage, you really want extra items. That's another reason why Fine Vintage was a consideration in this game, right? We started the game with the item grab bag, so we're already up basically an entire support item by the time that transforms into Fine Vintage. So that's something to consider as well, is that, you know, like, Fine Vintage works really well when we have these extra items. Boom, that's 2 support items now. Aegis is almost always the option that you take, and we get 2 Aegises in a row, which is fantastic. Aegis is really good, Randuin's is really good. You can also go the variation where you play around like Zeeks and Lockets and stuff like that, and maybe even like Chalices, but the Randuin's Aegis version is, I think, the most common version, and, you know, it makes sense. I get a couple more items here, which I think are just going to get Fine Vintage. I don't know that we would really want to make a Sterax here. And we're playing this 5 Faded board, which I think is also so cool. We're playing the Ahri as like an item holder. We're using, you know, like, a lot of people have talked about Heavenly version of this, or like Store Reaper version of this. I don't think anyone has really talked about a Faded version of Fine Vintage, but it kind of makes sense, right? You give all of this Armor Namar and shields to your Faded units, and then you use Fine Vintage to give them even more stuff to work with. It actually makes a decent amount of sense. The triple reroll here into Stand United, I think, is really, really nice here. And we also do pick up a set pretty much immediately on level 8, and another set, actually. Soraka 2 here, we're trying to figure out what exactly we're putting on our board. The Rakan also can kind of fit. But yeah, we get to play 7 Faded on this setup, which I think is just so cool. 7 Faded plus kind of a random Lee Sin, but it's Lee Sin 2. You'll see people at this level of play, they're always just fitting these 2-star 4-costs onto their board. You know, he's a duelist. He kind of fits on the board, but the big thing is just he's a 2-star unit. He's going to take advantage of all these extra stats. But yeah, you can see, like, we start to, like, take some damage here. We of course, still have all of these items stuck on our bench in this spot that we are going to get. Yeah, this is 2 more support items here. I think, okay, yeah, Virtue of the Martyr and Zizirot, which aren't amazing options, I would say, but not bad. The Zizirot is, you know, going to get the Aegis value. I think Zizirot is actually, like, really, really solid. The Virtue kind of synergizes with the Aegises, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like what you have to take at this point. But yeah, like you can see, if we hadn't had that stellar early game, we would be really low here, right? Because we've already dropped to 45, just sacking long enough to get these support items online. And even still, we got 2 more items sitting on our bench. We're even still taking a loss here, so down to 34 HP. We have Carousel here. We'd love to pick up something really juicy from Carousel, like a Lysandra, but we can't get it there. We could pick up Syndra Pair. Yeah, I think that has to be it, so we can look for maybe like a Syndra 2 to, you know, juice up our board even more. And yeah, we have a support item coming, and then another one after that. But yeah, kind of the scary thing on our board right now is we just kind of lack damage, so we're probably gonna have to roll a bit more on A tier. So here's the big hit. Here's the thing I will say, like this is definitely high roll this game. I saw that he had a set 2 on his board, and I wondered like how he even got to it. We find set 2 here on level 8, which I mean, yeah, that's pretty good. He also takes the gem here, which I like. Gem is like usually the second consideration when you take this augment. Like the step 2. Step 1 is getting the Aegises and the Randuins online, so your board's really tanky. And then step 2 is you get the gem. Now that our board's really tanky, we buy a friend at time. We have all this frontline. Then, you know, the gem actually provides us enough damage to start winning fights. We'd love to pick up another Randuin, or a Randuin's here, or another Aegis. We don't get either of those, so we end up just going Banshee's Veil, which I like. You know, it's CC immunity on your front line. It's, you know, more stats for like Lee Sin and stuff, like all this stuff. It works with the positioning. That's the thing that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, this set 2, I think, bailed us out a bit, but you can see like a lot of these fights become not close at all. You know, I don't think we would have lost either of these fights even with set 1, because you look, set's 100% HP. He obviously did good damage here. But I was blown away by just the take of Fine Vintage and how well it actually works. You know, once you get all of these support items all in line, now he's got 5 full support items. Now our board's actually cruising, and now we get to go level 9 and actually like capping out our board. We get some more items here. We don't have to immediately slam because of the changes to Fine Vintage. You could look at like a real item slam here, or you could look at just Fine Vintaging. The only problem with Fine Vintaging an item here is that it's going to take you a really long time to actually convert it into a Fine Vintage item. He's even going to use the duplicator on the Ahri. I actually kind of love this, just to make Ahri 2 here. But yeah, he's looking at... Yeah, I like this, and this is something that you see a lot of people do later they get with Fine Vintage. Is once you get to like stage 5, it's hard to find vintage an item, right? 4 rounds, stage 5 is a lot. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a real item onto Rakan. We're going to make this adaptive helm with the Morellos, and this is just going to be our setup. Rakan plus Set kind of duo carry. We get some increased player health here, which honestly isn't even that good for us here because our board's already quite strong, but it is, you know, not bad. And we're also, we got the Riven in on level 9. We're starting to pivot more into like this board that gives all of our units extra stats. You know, Ultrist is good. Eventually down the line, we can maybe fit like a Wukong in here. We can fit like a Soraka for the 3rd Ultrist. We want to juice up all of our units because everybody is a piece of the party when you are when you're playing this augment. Even the Zizirot. Look at the Zizirot go on the front line here. Just bonk, 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 and now the Ascension. But look, it's so hard for them to kill anything on this board with Fine Vintage. And this was the Fine Vintage experience in the past, right? This was the Fine Vintage experience earlier on in the set. The difference now is that it's way harder to get there. But when you have such a good early game, when you streak into a 3-2 Fine Vintage with an extra item from Item Grab Bag, I think this augment actually makes perfect sense to take. And it's a really good example of how, you know, augment win rates can sometimes turn people off of certain augments because they're bad in the stats, quote unquote bad in the stats. But I mean, just look how good our board is here. The set is unkillable here. We have a sort of close fight against this player here, but still we end up with 5 units still alive. It's also a really cool board, this 5 faded board, where we get to, you know, obviously play around the set, but we also just fit in a bunch of other kind of like random units to fit 5 faded. And it's such a flexible board. You know, you would think when playing around Fine Vintage, you know, you'd be playing the Heavenly setup, you'd be playing the Story Weaver setup, but no, this is faded Fine Vintage, which I think is so cool. Pick up a Lysandra finally, which is a fantastic in here. She can farm us more items. Pick up Zyra Khan 2 here, which is also fantastic. We are level 9, so I won't, in my high roll counter that I'm clicking here, I won't call this a high roll. And we also do fit the Amumu in here, which is fantastic. Porcelain and Warden for some of our biggest units, the Lysandra and the Set here. So yeah, I mean, this is our board. At this point, we just have to figure out how to cap high enough to potentially win the lobby, because there's a lot of people. Oh, and we should probably, you could maybe find vintage the Starax here. If you want to, you should probably do it immediately because I believe it will count that round. But looks like he's probably just going to stare axe the Lee Sin, right? And just leave Lee Sin on our board the entire game. Because once again, like I said, 4 whole rounds. That is so long to get there. Maybe we are fine vintaging it though. I guess we'll see in a sec whether he wants to. Yeah, okay. I like this. 4 rounds is just way too much, I think. By the time 4 rounds are up, like, and losing any of these this late in the game could actually cost us a lot of HP. So yeah, even a fight like this, that's actually relatively close because we're fighting a pretty strong board out of Setsi. Yeah, I don't want to have the possibility of losing that round. You also see we're up to 40 gold, level 9. Such a huge streak here, on a 7 streak after we finally hatched all of our items and hit that set 2. Now we can look at going 10 and just capping out our board insanely high. The other cool thing is actually we're swapping our board around a lot. Even though our positioning's rough with fine vintage, we are not just saying like, good enough. We're doing our best to move our board. I would think you would just go like blue buff here for Lysandre just to get some more casts off. I think he's looking at like Vow Lys. Oh yeah, that was just a duplicator. Okay, he's just gonna go Vow on the Lysandre here. Interesting. The Vow on Lys over the blue buff. I know she's a pretty big mana pool, so I guess he just wants to get that first cast and then give her some tank stats so that she has less chance of dying, especially with this gem. We want her to live as long as possible. I could certainly see it. It's a pretty interesting pickup here. But yeah, we're starting to kill people, right? We beat Jugyu's board. We pick up a Hui here, which could be a nice little addition, though same issue with the fine vintage. If we want to get Hui in for 5 rounds to duplicate a 5 cost, we're going to be going into stage 7. That's yeah, once again, pretty hard. But I kind of love this little like half positioning here where he could either swap his back line to the left or his front line to the right. And so he can actually swap relatively quickly. It's still pretty difficult for him to get like a swap on someone if they're just looking at him. But if someone scouts him and then pivots away and looks at someone else, it's actually very reasonable that he could get him with this position, which is very cool. Irelia Shop here, who's a unit that you could think about getting in. She's armor shred for our entire board, which is really, really nice. So I could certainly see just, yeah, random Irelia onto our board. It's also another duelist, even though we still have the duelist in with Yasuo, which I think will have to come out down the line, but, you know, right now doing work. We fight Setsuko, who has gotten a lot stronger since we last fought him. He has an Udyr 2 on his board now. He's also got, like, triple itemized, like, basically everyone. So this is finally going to be our first loss in a couple of stages, losing to Setsuko's board. But upside is we're level 10. We're 10 gold here, but we have so many upgrades left to find. This board is so far from capped. We can pick up an item here, either for Lee Sin or for Irelia here. He goes to the Gunblade, which I don't know where this actually ends up. It could also be a Lysandre item. Actually, it could go on anyone. Gunblade tends to be best onto this Irelia unit, but I don't know how much damage she's actually doing here. I think, yeah, I mean, around this point, you can think about getting out of some of these faded units, getting more into some of just better units. He wants to keep in 3 faded, which I think is interesting, but actually makes a good amount of sense. It's like relatively easy to keep in Thresh for Behemoth, and obviously we're keeping the set in, and we just still have this Ahri in right now as another Arcanist, and really just the 3rd faded in this spot. But yeah, like, a lot of the other faded units are kind of annoying to fit. Obviously, we could get to like a Cinder later, but I don't know. We get a Renans here, which I mean, I love. It's a great Irelia item. He also ended up making the Gunblade on the Lysandre, just trusting that she's going to do enough damage in a spot like this. I would have actually been kind of tempted to put it onto Irelia, just because I think it would be slightly better on her, because she has the more consistent DPS. But either way, I mean, Gunblade on Lysandre, making it so that she heals up herself just when she does damage is not bad at all. And ooh, look at that pot onto the Gnar there. Fantastic. Gonna win us this fight. Yeah, we're holding a lot of stuff here that I think is not that useful, but, you know, we'll see. Yeah, like the Alawi that we still have in right now is kind of random, just for basically Warden. I definitely think we get into the Wukong down the line. I really want to get the Wukong Soraka in. We'll see if we end up actually getting that in, because that would require cutting something else. But yeah, I mean, at this point, we are level 10. We get a second Xayah Rakan, and he's actually just going to play that on his board here and then slam Protector's Vow onto it here. Roll down, try to pick up an Irelia 2. We do pick up a Lysandre 2. This is what I was talking about capping our board, by the way. Now we're playing a full 5-cost board. We found double Rakan. We found Lysandre 2. We don't have Irelia 2 just yet, because we couldn't just roll deep enough. But this should still be more than enough to beat Setsuko's board. And yeah, the fight is not even close versus Setsuko. We just dominate him. And so it's just us and Bruce left. Like I said, though, we still have so much stuff left to upgrade. The Irelia 2 is huge. Still looking for Azir 2 and Ornn 2. Pick up the Azir here. And yeah, this this should be it. Bruce Lull is playing a Heavenly board. He will say, I'm very, very happy about just being this far into the game, because Heavenly, it's actually a Gnar board. It's not Heavenly, I saw the Cane, but yeah, it's a Gnar board, which does cap out higher, but still, it's going to be so hard for this Gnar board to actually just kill everything here. Like, there's so many tanks, and there's the Lysandra. It just seems impossible for Gnar to get through everything. He does pick up another Zyrakan here, so we're actually 2 off of our Rakan 3. So he's going to roll it down a bit just to see. Maybe we randomly hit a double Rakan shop and hit Rakan 3. That guy's not holding any, so it could happen. But obviously we don't have to sell board or anything, because we're way too strong, and this will be the last fight. So yeah, I don't know. I thought this was a really, really interesting game, because this is an augment that I think almost no one would take, just because the stats look horrible on it, but it ended up doing so well for us here. I mean, it was an easy win out. Oh, he actually started talking at the end there. I just had his audio on. But yeah, I just thought that was a fantastic game from 888 from a player who I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but he did very well in the tourney, and I mean, I thought this was an awesome augment pick. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my Twitch and all my other links down below. Thanks for watching.